Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily update for March 8th, 2022. We've been focusing almost exclusively on the strategic crisis over Ukraine, which is played as a Russia versus Ukraine situation, but is actually quite different. We've been focusing on it because we're trying to address what must be done, not just to resolve this crisis, but to move to a new strategic and financial architecture which acts for the mutual security interests of all people, of all sovereign nation states, based on the recognition that no nation's security should be achieved at the expense of another. This is behind President Putin's request that the security interests of the Russian state be recognized by NATO. That's what he demanded. And that's what was rejected, taken off the table by Blinken on behalf of the Biden administration. And that's why we're ending up in this confrontation, which has within it the danger of going into a full-scale nuclear war. Now, people are being told that the U.S. and NATO are defending the Ukrainian security. Well, how is Ukraine's security defended by refusing security guarantees for Russia? We're also told that we're defending the democracy and freedom of the people of Ukraine. That's a complete fraud. What was the interest in democracy when the elected government of Yanukovych was overthrown by a coup sponsored by the United States and NATO in February 2014? Instead, the Ukrainian people are being used as a cannon fodder, a sacrifice, as a weapon against Russia. Ukraine is functioning as a puppet state. Now the question is, what's the main crime of Russia? What's behind all this economic warfare and this attack? The request for security guarantees, is that really a crime? No, it's the Russian refusal to submit to the demands of a global fascist order run by the global central banks. That's what's called the Great Reset. And today I want to focus on the economy a bit, but let me give you just an example of someone who is standing up for sovereignty. And that's the case of Imran Khan, the Prime Minister of Pakistan. 20 European Union ambassadors came to him and demanded that Pakistan condemn Russia for its actions in Ukraine. Khan not only refused, he said to them, "What do you think of us? Are we your slaves, that whatever you say we will do?" Well, that's the nature of the so-called rules-based order, that the military power of the U.S. and NATO has the right to demand that every nation submit to the global fascist order, the so-called New World Order, that's based on this idea of the Great Reset and the Green New Deal. Now, everyone's being hit by this. This morning, I was shocked. I filled up my car with gas, and it cost 110 euros, which is about $130 to fill the gas tank of my car. It's enough to make me start thinking about riding my bicycle around town. But this is hitting everybody. The price of energy is going up across the board. The effect of this on food prices, the natural gas used for fertilizer. Wheat prices are up 50% over 3 months ago. Now, this is being blamed on Russia and the war in Ukraine, but that's a fraud. Oil prices started going up before anything was done against Ukraine by Russia. The hyperinflation is driven by quantitative easing, that is, the vast amounts of money being created by central banks to cover over their unsustainable debt, the debt of corporations, the debt of nations, the debt of private individuals, the debt of all governments. They can't cover it. There's not enough production. In fact, they're squeezing out and hollowing out the manufacturing and the real wealth-producing sectors and replacing that with fiat money, funny money that's being printed by central banks that goes back to the private banking system that run the central banks and not into the real physical economy. What we're seeing is a hyperinflation caused by speculation And the Federal Reserve keeps saying, we're going to taper, we're going to cut back, we're going to change this, but they're not doing it. They can't do it, because if they do, it will trigger a chain reaction of defaults, which will show exactly how bankrupt the whole system is. It will make the Lehman Brothers collapse of 2008 look small potatoes in comparison. Now, the deployment against Russia, economic warfare against Russia, ask yourself, how does this benefit the security of the United States? To threaten the living standards of the people of Russia, who are being told that the U.S. policy is to drive their living standards to the ground. That doesn't improve our security. That's not good for any country to do that to another country. And if you think that's going to stop Russia from demanding security guarantees, it merely convinces the Russian leadership that no matter what they do, they're going to be hit by sanctions and economic warfare. So this is where you see the craziness of the Western elites, and they're sticking to it. They're refusing to recognize that not only are they the cause of this crisis, but they're driving the situation to where it might get out of control. Now, this crisis is preparing you, the consumer, for an era of scarcity, typified by the policies of the Green New Deal and the Great Reset. Remember what Klaus Schwab said in his book, Stakeholder Society. He said, your desire for a better living standard is what's threatening the planet. This is what Barack Obama told South African students in 2014 or 2015, when he asked them what they wanted, and they said a U.S.-style standard of living. And he said, no, 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 you can't have that. If you get that, the planet will boil over. That's why the Great Reset is being put in place, to create a dictatorship which will use the argument of global warming to prevent nations from developing. And Russia and China not only won't accept that, but they're leading a growing movement of nations against it. And that's why Russia is being targeted right now. The alternative is Lyndon LaRouche's 4 laws: physical economy rather than speculation, real goods production rather than pumping out fake money that goes into the pockets of billionaires with the idea that when they go out and buy yachts and fancy cars, some of it will dribble down to you. What has to be done is the speculators have to be hit. And LaRouche's 4 laws starts with reimposing Glass-Steagall banking separation, which doesn't simply mean that you separate the investment banks from the commercial banks. It means no bailout for speculators. You want to speculate? Go ahead, speculate to your heart's content. If you lose, you eat the losses. Now, the problem is the people who have been eating the losses are the pension holders whose funds were invested with the speculators. The speculators make money every time they trade financial instruments, but you are seeing your net wealth crash because of the effects of speculation when the bubble pops. We can't allow that to happen. That's what Glass-Steagall will stop. Then we need a credit system which makes real credit available for the physical economy, physical goods production, transportation, energy production, as opposed to redistributing scarcity. We have to increase the physical economy. As Lyndon LaRouche often said, there are no limits to growth. To be told there are limits to growth means that you have no future. Now, finally, we need investment in the science and the education processes that will allow the development of new discoveries that will spill over into new technologies that will increase the productivity of all labor. That's the alternative to instead trying to carve up the world's resources to make sure that the wealthiest people have the biggest share and that 90% or more of the world's population loses ground to the point that they die of hunger, die of disease, so that the wealthiest can have more money. That's what's behind the war drive against Russia. And I think those of you who are writing comments about how I'm a Putin puppet, you haven't thought this through at all, have you? You have no sense of global strategy. you also have no sense of the absolute evil of the ruling elites of the Western world, who, while they cry tears over the Ukrainian people, are starving 20 plus million people in Afghanistan, are starving the people of Yemen, are starving the people of Syria with sanctions. You think they care about the conditions of the people of Ukraine? To my Ukrainian friends, I tell you, you are being used as a sacrifice by the bankers so they can defeat the Russians and the Chinese, so they can successfully impose their global bankers' dictatorship. Join us to stop that. Sign the petition at the bottom, the link for which is at the bottom of the description page here, and let's make sure we win this fight on the right basis. Thank you, and I'll be back with you tomorrow.